I will start sharing my screen. Let me just tell you a bit about what we use this meeting for. We utilize what's called the Pomodoro method. Essentially, Pomodoro is a strategy of doing dedicated heads down studying for a set period of time and then doing a break where you are just not studying. This month in CDMP study group, we're focused on chapter 11. So we'll try to keep the discussion mostly around chapter 11, but of course you might be somewhere different in the book and that's fine. And then when the timer goes off, we're going to do a set period of discussion. Typically, it's about 10 minutes. We may end up doing more discussion. If it runs over, that's totally fine because the benefit to the group is really if we're all sharing our ideas, our questions, doubts, concerns, lived experiences, challenges, all of these things. That is how this works. So we're going to go ahead and read the book. We have 11 minutes left in this cycle. And then at the end of that, we'll come together to discuss what we read. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's jump into our first of the discussion breaks.
I have one question from data warehousing. In terms of its business driver, where it says that increasingly organizations are being asked to provide data as an evidence that they have complied with regulatory requirements because they contain historical data. Warehouses are often the means to respond to such requests. My question here is, since it is more around the regulatory requirements, which they ask the data as an evidence, isn't data privacy or data governance disciplines more responsible to respond to such requests rather than data warehousing?
Sure, but at the same time, if they're pulling the data from a data warehouse, if that's where the relevant information is stored, then it's worth mentioning in this chapter.
Okay, so when the question comes from the regulatory requirements, do the people in data warehousing respond within a typical organization in a practical terms?
Well, to your point, it would be senior leadership that's responsible for replying to regulatory or these kind of related considerations. I wouldn't expect the business intelligence analyst to be the person who's the first line of response, but they might require that analyst or a data warehouse engineer to help them get the data request.
Okay, I understand. This is a small part of that. I would interpret it like that.
That's how I would interpret it. They're a small part of it. That's where some of the information is being stored. But curious if other folks have experience with this. Maybe you've dealt with a regulatory question or an audit at your company. And so you might have more insight into how this plays out and what the operating structure looks like in this case.
I can refer to something back with GE during an audit. I would say you're right that it's governance privacy that would set the policy. The relevancy also to data warehouse is that the team that is administrators or manage the data warehouse are also then expected to understand that policy and make sure that it's implemented properly as well, right? For example, in the past, as a data governor at GE was presented with an audit, I had to work with the data warehouse teams or data lake teams to find a way to present that evidence that separation of duties was respected in the 1 year that was there, right? I, as a data governance or data privacy, would not have the capability to extract that evidence or how to show that evidence without having the knowledge around the technology around the data warehouse. I would say one body is more the policymaker, the standard creator, but then the execution of making sure that that policy is properly implemented leads down to the technology. They should also have the capability to provide evidence in one way or another that that policy has been implemented and has been respected during the audit period, for example. So that's from the past, the relevant experience there.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Other questions or follow-up?
I have a question, and it goes more to the exam. This topic in this chapter is the most foreign to me because I do not work with data lakes or any of these data warehouses. So how do I memorize all these chapters? Because as I said, I don't have work experience.
Well, it is 10% of the questions on the exam potentially. So what I would advise is to focus on the 3 main methodologies because a lot of the questions that you might get might be around the various methodologies and trying to understand the components or the characteristics associated with each of the 3. In this chapter, it mainly talks about the Bill Inman Corporate Information Factory, Ralph Kemball's dimensional model, or a little bit about Data Vault. There's a longer portion about Data Vault in chapter 5. So I would just know about those 3 and make sure that you can understand and clearly articulate the differences between them. Mark, since you've also taken the exam already, do you have any other tips for folks?
There were a lot of chapters that I had a gap on. The mindset that you have to understand is that you don't necessarily need a full practical experience around the chapter to be able to pass the chapter. You mainly need to really memorize the concepts and to understand the concepts behind it. But I would say that there were no questions that would present itself in a how do you apply this kind of way. It's really straightforward. What is in the book, memorize it. So that's my hint there. In the chapters that you don't feel so confident about, be sure at least that you understand the concepts and to be able to explain the differences. But don't think that you cannot take the exam yet because you don't have practical experience around the chapter. Don't hold yourself back in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely a test of your critical reading skills, the fundamentals exam specifically. When you get into studying for the specialist exams, they say that Dhamma really wants you to have that work experience or subject matter expertise in the topic. But those are very different from the fundamentals exam, which hews very closely to the content of the data management body of knowledge. If you read that and you feel like you understand it, then I think you're ready for the test.
Okay, so I have another question now. Because I'm concerned about that, I bought a whole bunch of books about it and I've been reading, and it's really an interesting topic.
That's great.
But however, online, I have seen that not everybody has the same opinion about the different concepts and the different implementations. For example, one would say data meshes don't work, implementation is no good, it just messes up your database. I just want to know opinions from people in this group if that is the case, or if it's a pretty straightforward and I was just reading the wrong chat.
Great questions. I just want to reemphasize what I just said, which is please make sure if you're mainly focused on passing this fundamentals exam that you're staying very close to what's in the DMBOK. I actually think that reading too far outside of the test, it's great for your professional development as a data practitioner, but don't confuse yourself in the lead up to the test. It is a test of the DMBOK. I can check in the index, but I'm not sure if they mention data mesh. It's really risen to preeminence in the last 6 years since the DMBOK was published. I frankly can't really speak to whether it's good or bad, but I definitely can tell you that it's not one of the main data warehousing methodologies tested on the exam. I'm happy to parking lot this and we can do some investigation into this topic, but that's outside of the scope of getting people prepared for the fundamentals exam.
Great, thank you so much.
I don't want to discourage outside reading, but maybe save some of the more complex topics for after you pass. All right, other questions?
Hey, this is TJ. I have a question. How do I organize the information for the activities? Because when you are reading the basic concepts, which explains what is what, when you are reading the activities, techniques, or implementation methods, how do you organize the information? And another question is, you read any of the topics, say an example, implementation of the business user portfolio or master the business tool requirement. We have a number of topics like this, right? How do I question myself as the exam is asking? In the sense, like when I am reading that particular topic, remediation and transformation of data, say an example. Inside this, they explain about all those things. So how do I question myself? Is there any tips so that I can easily remember things?
Mark, do you want to take this one?
Did I understand it correctly? The question there is how do you organize the information from the DMBOK properly so that you can easily access it during the exam? Is that the point?
Yeah, that's one question.
The exam has changed a little bit over time, but basically there are two things that will help you. One is I made sure that the context diagram for almost each chapter is either referenced. So if either you're using the physical book or if you're using a PDF copy or the soft copy, make sure that you have somewhat an easy way to get to the context diagram. That helped me a lot because that page summarizes a lot of the content in the chapter. It's a very summarized page of what the inputs is, what are the activities, deliverables, and so forth, right? So that's one, the context diagram. That's an important one. The other one is either create your own notes or use the notes that Data Strategy Pros has already prepared. The only thing that has changed is that you're unable to use your own notes now. If you're using a physical copy of the book, you have to find a way to put those notes basically behind the pages because apparently you cannot use any other physical copy except your book. If you have notes on the book itself, I think that should be fine. So either you would be able to annotate certain pages with the very key summary points. What are the three types of blank to have them very easily captured? Because one thing that people don't really understand is that you do not really have enough time to browse the book to find something. When you think that you can use the soft copy to find the term and so forth, you're just losing so much time. If you have a one-pager, either the context diagram or a one-page summary about the chapter that you can easily reference, that will be extremely helpful during the exam.
Thank you, Mark. Just to reiterate for everyone, you can use only one book, so it should definitely be your copy of the DMBOK. I've got mine here. You can see I put tons of sticky notes in it. Like Mark said, he highlighted the context diagrams. With my sticky notes, I marked the start of each chapter so I could quickly go to page 1 for each chapter. And then I also highlighted and sticky noted the content that I thought I might get confused on. Where I had missed questions, I went in and found that section of the book. And just in case I felt like that was a point of potential confusion for the test, then I could find the content, trying to just help myself out there. If you have an ebook, we recommend doing this exact same thing using Adobe PDF's free reader program. That's been an app that people have been really happy with. You cannot use any form of external notes or a second book. Just be aware of that. I used the print copy because I knew that I would get distracted if I tried to study using a Kindle or just my laptop. But for most people, I would actually recommend using the PDF because then you can use Control F to find specific terms. That's how I was looking for data mesh just a second ago. I also have the ebook. I was also checking to see if it's just a little bit faster to find things. The index in the DMBOK is frankly not very good. It's not super comprehensive and you can't rely on it. That's part of why I was like, let me get really tactical with these sticky notes. That was my approach. There was a second component of TJ's question. I want to make sure that we get to that, but do you have any questions about what Mark and I have shared so far?
Thank you very much. First thing, I have a topic says near real-time and real-time feeds. So they are talking about 3 different methods. One is the trickle feed, messaging, and streaming. The question is, when I am reading this one, if I am an exam in a questionnaire, how would I prepare a question? Like, what are all the 3 different type of feeding mechanism for the real-time, or maybe the methods used for the near-time or real-time? So how would I question myself for each and every topic?
That's a great idea.
When I am reading some of the topics, it's really hard to make a question out of it. Is there any tips available? Then I'm very happy for that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. TJ was saying make questions for yourself. That's awesome. And it might be challenging, but I feel like it is kind of supposed to be challenging. If you ask someone, how was your marathon? And they were like, I don't know, I didn't try very hard, or it was easy the whole time. You'd be like, wait, are we talking about the same thing? I do feel like the process for studying, part of what makes it worth doing is that it is kind of tricky. So if you're finding it hard, that's okay. I remember doing this when I was in college. I didn't use it for my CDMP study specifically, but the idea with this sheet of paper is breaking out your notes into different categories. On the left side of the page here, they're saying list your main ideas. In the main part of the page, this is where you would put all of your notes line by line. And then at the bottom, they're saying summarize what you have just written. I feel like creating a notes page like this after every class could be a really helpful way to structure the book, because this way you can really think about, okay, what did I actually not understand of what I read? You can put your questions for yourself you just came up with. This is one study topic that I think people might benefit from. One that we talk about in the CDMP study guide is a little different from this. It's called the Feynman technique, and it's named for Richard Feynman, who was a pioneering physicist of the 20th century. He had this concept of challenging himself by starting with a blank piece of paper and then seeing how well he really understood the concepts by explaining it to himself. So you could do that either in written notes or in a concept map, but just starting from a blank page and using that to do forced recall.
That method of starting from scratch and trying to explain was actually what I was also trying to get to. I didn't use it a lot in the exam, TJ, but what happened is that I did a presentation. It was the data governance topic on the DMBOK to my team of 5 data engineers. Just to be able to challenge yourself, are you able to explain this chapter in a very concise way and get the key points out to people? Are you able to explain it? And then the second thing that also drives is that it will also bring back to you questions that might be relevant, and they would basically ask you some things. It would challenge how much did you really understand and how much did you really memorize from the chapter. So exactly that concept, Nicole, starting from scratch and trying to explain it from zero. See if you can explain it. If you really want to challenge it, try to explain it to either your partner, your children, if you don't want to bring it to the office space. But it would also be really helpful for people who say like, hey guys, I read a chapter. I'm setting up this meeting. Anybody who might be interested to hear out what the DMBOK has to say around data governance or data strategy or valuation, whatever it might be, just put it out there. It will challenge your understanding and how much you really know about the chapter.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Mark. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nicole, for that technique.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great ideas. If folks have other study tips, I think we'd all benefit from hearing them.
And also, just a reminder, if you go for the purchasing the exam, they give you the practice exams as well, right? So go on that Canvas platform and practice as much as you can, because that will definitely really help you. If you're not doing that, do it, because it will show you really the gaps on which chapters are you deficient on.
Thank you. Great point.
If I book the exam, do I have to fix up the date right now?
Nope.
Okay,
You
great.
get lifetime access, so you can take the test at any time.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right. Well, we have 7 minutes in this study block, so let's do 7 minutes of reading, and then we'll come back together and discuss. All righty. So we are in another short break. Do folks have questions from their reading about this topic?
I have another question. I remember in the last Q&A, you mentioned about the 3 methodologies. I heard about Inmon, Kimball. I think I missed the third one. Can you tell me?
The third methodology is called Data Vault. It is mentioned briefly in this chapter, and it's also mentioned as a data modeling schema in chapter 5. It is a data warehouse methodology. It utilizes hubs, which are entities, and then it links them to relationships and connects that with also satellites, which is detailed data. You've got your hubs, your links, and your satellites, as per the diagram here at the right. There's only a tiny mention in this chapter, so I would say it's not as important as the Inman and the Kimball methodologies. Those are the main ones that I would focus on, but probably good to know that Data Vault is an alternative approach. And in data modeling, it talks more about how this is a time-based methodology or scheme.
Oh, thank you for that. Not sure why I couldn't find Data Vault in this whole chapter.
Okay, you're challenging my ability to look things up quickly, which is a good task-taking skill. On the ebook, it's page 398, which is section 1.3.8.1, historical data. It mentions a paragraph about the data vault, which can be used to store history, which is why it is here in this section on historical data.
All right, sure. I've marked it. Thank you so much. And also about the PDF. I do have a physical book and I'm still reading about that, but I'm not sure where I could find the PDF version.
They offer it through the publisher Technics Pub.
Sure.
You can order the DMBOK there too. It's just typically cheaper, I found on Amazon.
Great. Thanks.
You're very welcome. The purpose of data warehousing is to get the data into a format that makes it really easy for business analysts to access it. The idea of the data warehouse really rose to eminence in the 90s. We've already mentioned some of the key thinkers in this space, Bill Inman and Ralph Kimball. They're still working in data warehousing on different methodologies to bring this concept up and continue to keep it relevant. The implementation has changed a lot, but you need to focus on what you need to know for the CDMP. And the knowledge cap here stops at 2017. Just keep that in mind. As Ariadne mentioned, the methodologies have changed a bit over time. So just focus on what you need to know. And then after that, focus on learning what you need for your job or for your own edification. It's 10% of the exam, so this is a pretty important chapter. And it's also one of the options out of these 7 total options for the CDMP specialist exams. As we've mentioned, data warehousing stores data in a way that's focused on adding value to advanced analytics, and business intelligence refers to any kind of report or dashboard up to but not including machine learning or data science. This is like analytics and dashboarding, a historical look back. Then some of the stuff that they cover in advanced analytics and data science chapter, which they call big data in the DMBOK. That's not really as important as understanding this, which is the comparison of the 2 methodologies. For Inman, you mainly need to know that his idea was called the corporate information factory. He thought of the data warehouse as being a subject-oriented, integrated, time-variant, and non-volatile collection of data. I feel like that's almost a tongue twister. And then Kimball, his methodology is dimensional modeling. He thought of the data warehouse as a copy of transaction data specifically structured for query and analysis. Even you can just tell from the definition, the Kimball methodology is a little bit easier to think about. This is the one that's really won out over time. This book is called the Data Warehouse Toolkit. It's kind of recommended as the Bible in this space. Inman has his big newest book called The Data Lakehouse. This is modernizing the data warehouse for the era of data lakes. But again, this is not tested on the exam. I think what you really need to know in order to get started with this chapter is structuring your thinking around the different methodologies, coming to understand how Inman is different than Kimball. It's going to be great. You're going to feel so ready when this test comes because you will have learned the Kimball methodology, learned the Inman methodology. You'll know the difference for your workplace, whether you'll be able to identify which one you have. We are into our final study session now. After this, we will wrap up our studies and go on with our Sunday. Thank you guys for joining. That was Co-working on Chapter 11, Data Warehousing and Business Intelligence. I hope that you enjoyed this session. Hopefully this was a good time for you to dedicate to your reading. Hopefully we were able to answer some of your questions about the test or about this topic. It is hard because, as Adrian pointed out, it is one of the more technical topics in the DMBOK. So you might feel a bit uncomfortable on first read of the material, given that if you worked on the business side of the domain, then this might feel new and different. But I encourage you to just think of the CDMP as a reading test. Make sure that you're just familiar with the DMBOK's take on this subject matter.
One last question regarding the link which you've sent, which is technicspub.com. I see a couple of options there to buy, but I wasn't sure for the fundamentals exam what would be necessary and what would not be.
Yeah, let's look at that together. This is the official publisher of the DMBOK, and they now have it in a couple different languages, which is very cool, but the test is still only in English. So we recommend you buy the English language book. If you are an English as a second language person, that means you get 20 extra minutes for the exam. So take advantage of that. This is the ebook, this first one. This is the print version, which I've been able to find it cheaper on Amazon. So just shop around. But as far as I know, this is the only place to get the PDF. You can opt for a bundle. We love a good deal. Navigating the Labyrinth, I haven't read it personally, but it's by Laura Sebastian Coleman. She's one of the former leaders of Dhamma, and she actually works with our career coach, Seth. She's like his skip boss. No pressure, Seth. I'm sure she's just like a luminary in this field, and people have said really great things about this book, Navigating the Labyrinth, which you can also pick up just by itself. People have said that it's a more friendly version of the concepts in the DMBOK, so you might consider this as well, or you can find it on Amazon or wherever books are sold. They have a guide to the data management body of knowledge. I would buy our CDMP fundamentals notes instead of buying the guide. We have our notes, and this contains per chapter what we think are the key topics, concepts, and vocabulary. We also offer some practice questions in addition to those that you get free when you buy the CDMP exam. They'll give you practice questions, but if you want more, we also sell those. We also have a Dhamma dictionary available from TechnicSpub. I've never heard of anyone using this before, but if you do buy it, let me know how that goes. But again, unfortunately, you can only use one book on the CDMP exam. So just make sure that you have the DMBOK and that you annotate it in a way that is going to be helpful to your future self. It was my first time seeing either of those, but I'm sure they're awesome.
That's great. How about the Navigating the Labyrinth? Is that a compulsory book for the CDMP exam?
No, it's just Laura Sebastian Coleman wrote a lot of the DMBOK, and then Navigating the Labyrinth is her own book on data management. It's not compulsory, but it might help you understand some of the concepts. The only thing
great.
that is compulsive is the DMBOK.
That's great. For the exam, as you said, I can use only one book. Does that include Dhamma print version and PDF, both?
Great question. You can only have one version of one book. You cannot switch between the PDF and the physical book.
I just wanted to say that I've bought Navigating the Labyrinth, and it's a great handbag book. It's not as bulky as the DMBOK, and it really is just an abridged version of the DMBOK. I'm not saying just read that, but it's great for just drip feeding the hard reading from the DMBOK. When I have that on the hoof, I just feel that it helps with recall. As it says, it's an executive level read. It's like the next level. So can you explain what you've read in the DMBOK to an 8-year-old so that you can answer the questions for the MCQ? But if you were sitting around the executive table, Laura's book is a great read just to help ingest and communicate that at a more senior level.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Dawn. Someone's pointed out in the chat that the book is abridged. It may not cover absolutely every single concept in the DMBOK, and it may not cover even every chapter in the DMBOK. But I think what Don is saying is what I've heard from others is that the author does a really nice job of explaining their concepts in a executive level way.
Yes, and I agree. It is an abridged version. I wouldn't rely on that as revision, but it's just great to have that once you've passed and you still need to just double check.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are coming out with a DMBOK 2.5. I think the timeline on that is sometime in this upcoming year. They'll have an update out, which is mainly fixing typos or other superficial mistakes. No new content, just corrections, but I'm excited for that.
I will have some follow-up question. Probably I will send you an email.
Sure. The best way to get in touch with us is info@datastrategypros.com. And then our website is just datastrategypros.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. If you connect with me, I'll invite you to the group. Thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Bye.